Today is a really special and important day in the tiny house. It's something that I've been waiting over 4 years to happen, and that is we finally got our wood stove installed. So if you followed the tiny house since we got it, the wood stove was something that I ordered maybe a couple weeks after the tiny house got delivered, because our ultimate goal is for the house to be off-grid, or at least mostly off-grid, to make our utility bills more affordable and to be more environmentally friendly. And the wood stove has been just like a runaround ever since we got it delivered. Nobody would install it. We couldn't find all the parts that we needed. It's been a whole thing. But the important thing is we finally got somebody to install it, and today we're going to do our first burn of the wood stove. There it is.
Give it a shot.
I got the fire extinguisher ready.
Good?
Yep. Is it light?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's supposed to close the door a little bit, I do believe.
I feel like this is going to take some playing around to really figure out how to get it to burn. So I should mention that this is not really the first burn. This is the first burn indoors. When you get the stove, you have to do a few hours of burning it outside to like cure the paint. And this stove actually comes in black, and I got the high temperature stove paint because I wanted it to be red because it looks really cute, and it matches our decor, and our dog is named Red. So there's a lot of reasons that I wanted it to be red, but it's like it's really the centerpiece of the house. When you walk in, it was designed for the wood stove to kind of be the center of the house. So this is an important piece of feeling like our tiny house is actually together. The neat thing that we just got to, we haven't played around with yet, this is the oven that goes on the top. I don't think I've seen anybody use the oven actually, but I knew when I ordered this wood stove that it came with the oven attachment, because that was something I really wanted to be able to cook, because that's a main principle of tiny house living, is everything is supposed to have more than one function. I think this one has like 4. So it's our heat, it's going to dehumidify the house, we can cook on it, and then, ooh, what was that?
Metal expanding?
Yeah. We purposely situated the wood stove directly across from our clothes drying rack, because that's going to be used in the winter to at least do some of our clothes drying. Maybe not all of it, but the temperature gauge on the stove is actually pretty helpful, because then we can watch the overall heat of the wood stove go up. Gives you a little bit of a gauge of how hot the fire is burning. I feel like it's going pretty good so far. When we were doing the research to set up our tiny house, and we were kind of going through the process of the layout and ordering how we were going to have the house built, we put a lot of research into the things that we wanted, and the wood stove was something that I knew I wanted. And I looked at a lot of different wood stoves that were just too big for a tiny house, and then I eventually came across the Cubic Mini wood stoves, and they have 2 different sizes, the Cub and the Grizzly. And we ended up getting the Grizzly, which is the slightly bigger one, just slightly bigger. There were a few reasons that I wanted it. First of all, it fit in my price point, because wood stoves are not cheap. We looked at the Kimberly wood stove, which I think is like a few $1,000s. So we ended up getting the Grizzly, and at that point, this was several years ago, it came as a system where you could buy the flue pieces, because it's a 3-inch flue. So it's pretty specialized, and there's this wall mount, but I decided not to mount it onto the wall, and instead we got this plant holder that supports the weight of it, because I think the stove is like 50 or 60 pounds, and I just didn't want to have to mount that onto the wall. Underneath the stand, we got this fire resistant mat just in case you're moving things around and an ember falls out. This will prevent it from burning the countertop, which I thought was a nice feature. I ordered that separately. That was an Amazon thing. And I really like the fact that it came with the oven attachment on the top so we can like roast vegetables and stuff. I'm very, very excited to do that. One of the pieces that we bought recently, which I'm glad we didn't install this initially when we first had the house built, because later on they came out with this extra insulation. It's a double wall flue, and then that extra piece at the top has insulation inside of it and then another wall. So it turns into a triple wall where it's exiting the house, and that's supposed to help a lot with reducing the creosote buildup and making sure that it is exiting the house properly so that it doesn't cool down as quickly. That's going to be a nice feature, and hopefully we won't have to clean it quite as frequently because we will have to climb up onto the roof of our house, which is kind of high. Here you can see the placement for the wood stove. When the house was being built, we kind of knew that this was the spot that we were going to save because we had some extra counter space there, and it's almost right in the middle of the house. It goes right up through the ceiling and is kind of close to the ceiling fan to move the air around. One of the other pieces that I had ordered originally when I got the stove was the little tiny fireplace pieces, which I think are neat because any regular tools are not going to fit the door of this wood stove. Everything has to be miniature. So we got the little shovel and things so that we can move things around. I think that's going to be really helpful, and it looks pretty cute. One of the challenges that we're going to have with this stove is that when you get wood, they're usually pretty substantial pieces, and our door is only, I don't know, 6 or 7 inches across. So Pat's going to be pretty busy prepping and chopping the wood so that it will actually fit. But I think overall this is going to be something that makes the winter in the tiny house more enjoyable, because the bottom line is during the summer the tiny house is fantastic, but in the winter it's more stressful and there's more things to manage to make sure the pipes don't freeze and that we're heating the tiny house. And up until now we've been heating the house with electric, just space heaters. We have a mini split and we have a space heater over in the corner there, which is our main source of heat. When we first got the tiny house, we actually had a furnace built in with ductwork underneath the floor, and there are some vents that we've since sealed up because how many times did we use the furnace? Maybe twice, and then I forget what happened, but it
Collapsed.
broke and the ductwork wasn't working properly and it wasn't feeding through. So we very quickly decided that was not the way we were going to heat the tiny house, and you go through propane really fast. So we knew that wasn't going to be a long-term solution. So we switched to electric, thinking that we were going to have the wood stove installed very shortly after. Took a little longer than we expected, but we're finally here. So I'm really excited to see how winter is with having a wood-burning stove.
There's not that much wood in it.
No.
Just very dry.
It'll be interesting to see how long it'll burn on that.
Yeah. It's very little.
But it feels good. It's getting hot. It is definitely a process learning how to use the wood stove, when to feed it, how much oxygen to let it have, how to manage the temperature. And the first couple days that we were using the wood stove right after it got installed, we just had this saw that Patrick had to use to cut the wood into pretty small pieces. We also didn't have a lot of wood on hand. Our neighbor gave us a couple pieces because I really didn't believe that it was going to get installed until the day that it actually happened. It had taken so long. I still had my doubts. Even with these small pieces of wood, we were able to get the stove hot enough that we were able to make popcorn on the top. We just had to take the oven off if you want to put a pot on the top. And you can see already, since we had used the stove a few times, that special wood stove safe paint was actually not really holding up that well and starting to kind of peel off. So that was a little bit of a failure, but at least the bottom of it's still red. I wouldn't recommend painting the stove. I should have just left it black, but we were starting to figure out that we needed more wood and we needed a more efficient way of storing and prepping the wood so that this could be a more efficient way to heat the tiny house for the long term. We used this basket to keep a few pieces of wood on hand inside, along with our fire extinguisher and carbon monoxide detector, which are all in the same corner, so that we made sure that everything was really safe. We have another carbon monoxide and smoke alarm up in the loft, but we decided to order a cord of wood because we wanted to have more than enough to make it through the winter, and it definitely is. Are you helping? There's the wood that has been processed. Smaller pieces so it'll actually fit in the wood stove. And then there's part of what we've stacked already from the cord. Kind of forgot how much a cord of wood is. I feel like with our tiny little stove this will last like 3 years, but we'll see. If we actually heat the house most of the time with the wood, it'll be interesting to see how long this lasts. We're stacking it tonight just because it just got dropped off and it's going to rain tomorrow, so we want to get it as it should be. Red. Don't get out of there. Red fur. He's stealing our wood.
That's pretty much what happens all the time. I'll cut stuff and then he'll just take it away.
Oh, Mr. Redford.
So spreading it around. He's like, oh, what's kindling? Oh, that's mine. Okay.
Injustice, the next president to be, the news and what you hear, your career. It's time for you to face those fears, and it's all fair to be aware, and I'll be there, so don't be scared. Just take a deep breath of air, and 1, 2, 3 to 10, you begin to focus again, and though time flies, we'll have enough to realize this bigger than the both of us.